Hello, everyone. Today I'm excited because I got a new dress. It's not a perfect fit. It's actually really, really hard to find a dress that will fit someone with shoulders as broad as mine and a bust as small as mine. But it has pockets, so bonus points for that. I wanted to start this video on a high note because the rest of it is likely to be at least a little bit difficult, at least for me. Many of you have asked, and I've said before, I think it's really important for trans people to stand up and be trans people when they safely can, because there's so many of us who cannot, who feel isolated, alone, like there's something broken inside them, like there's something weird about them, they're defective, so on and so forth. Everybody feels these feelings from time to time. I get it. It's part of the normal human experience, but with a trans person, because of the way our world is set up and the hatred and vitriol that's flung at them from all corners at all times, it's a persistent feeling. It's like an intrusive thought that you can't make go away because it's not internal, it's coming at you from the outside. So it is important that people know they're not alone. It's not just them. There's nothing wrong with them, despite what other people might have to say about it. There are quite a few of us, actually. Now, what got me on this topic is a little while back, Stephanie Helms was having a discussion with the Kentucky Atheist. And it came up in the flow of conversation, this idea of how do trans people know when they're trans? And this answer is going to be different for everybody, but I did a members only video about it, and there have been a lot of questions, and per that preamble, I feel it is important that since I can be open about who I am, that I do. Perhaps it'll answer some people's questions about what transness is and what being a trans person is like. Perhaps it'll help some trans people find that something they need to keep being themselves in spite of all opposition, or to persist just a little bit longer until they're safe and can be who they always were. It's different for everybody, but for me, it was who I always was. As far back as my memories go, where I was aware of myself as an individual and had, consciousness and a sense of identity, I always thought of myself in feminine terms. I always considered myself to be a girl. And every vision of my future that I could conceptualize was as a woman. When I was around 3 years old, my grandmother asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I hadn't quite decided on whether I wanted to be an astronaut or a pirate or a spy. So I told her the one thing I was sure of, and that was a mother. Well, she gently explained to me that I couldn't do that. That wasn't possible for me, not because there was some rule or law, but because I didn't have the proper organs. I wasn't biologically equipped to do that. Now, I did go on to have kids in the way that was available to me. And, my kids are great. I don't regret that at all. But it took me a long time to get over that I couldn't ever carry my own children. It was difficult. It wasn't a matter of the things I was interested in or the toys I like to play with. It's stupid to gender those things. There are girls who like football and boys who don't. There are boys who like My Little Ponies and girls who don't. It's really dumb to try to say this means one gender and this means another gender. That said, I did have a lot more interest in the nurturing side of things, poetry and art and creativity and expression, than I did in the build, fast, destroy, smash kind of things that tends to be more associated with boys. I did have a keen interest in science, but science is for everyone. It's a similar thing with clothing, frankly. Like assigning genders to clothing, that's stupid. That doesn't actually mean anything. Like, go to Scotland and you've got men wearing kilts, or go back in time 50 years and you've got women never wearing jeans because that was bad. It was not part of the, you go back far enough and everyone wore dresses. It's absurd to say that clothing makes you only one specific gender because of the clothing, but that's the world I grew up in. People would say these clothes are for girls. Girls wear these clothes. It was simple logic. If you wear these clothes, you must be a girl. Add on to that the fact that I was a spectrum person. People told me I should always be honest. I should never tell lies. I took that as, a programming protocol. But then the same people would turn around and tell me to lie about who I was. And it didn't make sense to me. So when people said, these clothes are what girls wear, to me, that means that's the clothes I should wear. It was a very confusing time, not because I didn't understand who I was, but because I didn't understand the rules, because they were mutually contradictory to my perception. Always be honest, never tell lies, but also lie about who you are at the very core of your being all the time. What is a child supposed to do? Every voice around me told me these clothes are for girls. Only girls can wear these. And I was a girl. That was my way of expressing that. And so I tried it every time I thought I could get away with it, which was not nearly as often as I actually could get away with it. And so, correspondingly, I was punished. I was told, you can't do that. That's not for you. You are a boy. You have to wear boy clothes, etc., etc. And, it was never pleasant. But the thing of it is that when I put on girl clothes and when I got to express myself as who I knew myself to be, it was like I was able to get out of a box and stretch and be my full self. And while the punishments that followed were never pleasant, they were never as bad as having to go back into that box. So I continued to take every opportunity to sneak back out. Now, by elementary school, gender expectations had been drilled into my head. You are a boy. You must behave in this way. You must like these things and not like these things and all that nonsense. It's never one person who drills that into you. It's all of culture. It's every voice around you contributing to the overall message of this is who we're telling you you have to be, and you don't get a say. I'm a spectrum person, so understanding human behavior has always been difficult for me. So I have been trying my best to pay attention to how people act and how certain actions trigger certain responses and the interplay of the social dynamics so that I could fake it. And I think I fake it relatively well most of the time. But also I've been practicing for a very long time. So when it came to school, I understood I was supposed to play the role of a boy. Fine. I hated it, but we do what we have to do, such is life. The one concession I could get from my parents was having long hair, because this was the 80s and that was a thing boys were allowed to do if they were, a little punk or a little poetic or counterculture, I suppose. So I had very long hair whenever I could. My mother would cut my hair twice a year, something like that. But after I got a little bit older, I was able to get it longer and longer. And as long as I took care of it, it was fine. It always struck me as funny that when people would try to tease me about it, they'd say, "Ooh, that makes you look like a girl." They assumed I'd be hurt, but actually I loved it because that was the point. I could never really communicate what it felt like and what I was experiencing because we didn't have the language for that. It wasn't taught. It wasn't a thing that anyone ever expected to see. It just doesn't happen. We go through school hearing, and I've heard from many people recently who are just genuinely confused about what transness is, that they were taught and brought up and still live in a society where there is only male and female. There only the two options. Pick one or the other. It's a true dichotomy. There's nothing else. And of course, that's not true. It's never been true. Societies running all through history have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 identified genders. Even the ancient Hebrews, from which Christianity descends. But I get it. People are confused because they've never been exposed to the idea. They don't have the language to talk about it. And I very much relate because that's where I was as a child. I tried to tell people, but I didn't have the words. The best I could manage is, no, I am a girl. And people would just shrug or laugh or be confused or whatever because, as best they could tell, that was just not true. We didn't have terms like trans or the concept of gender being separate from biological sex. We barely understood what gay was, and that just because it was an elementary level insult and something that the president talked about was killing lots of people, while the president himself was responsible for killing lots of people. But that's a whole other topic entirely. The point is, it wasn't until much, much, much later that I began to learn about these things. And it wasn't from the people around me. It wasn't from mainstream education. It was, frankly, because of the internet, because I was exposed to people outside of my bubble. And they'd say, hey, I'm bisexual. And I'd be like, what is that? I don't understand. Or they'd say, hey, I'm transgender. And I would say, what is that? And more, I'd learn about these things and I'd go, oh, light bulb. That's a thing that describes me. I understand more about myself because now I know it's not just me. There's actually a word for it. There's a word I can tell people to convey the information of who I am and how I feel. Even so, it's still really, really difficult. And people sometimes ask me, you've known you were trans your entire life, even without the words for it. Why haven't you transitioned? Well, there's a few different answers. The first is the option wasn't open to me when I was younger. If I'd had the vocabulary, if I'd had the education, if I knew what the hell was going on, and I wasn't just weird and broken in the head. I live in the United States, where medicine is very expensive. You can't do anything unless you're independently wealthy or have very good insurance. I am neither. That door is not available to me, at least right now. I'm hoping that soon I'll have a job with better insurance, and then we'll see. Maybe. But it's just not been an option for me. The second is that I've since learned that no one owes anyone any particular kind of presentation. You can be who you are without having to put the trappings on to communicate that to the world. I do what I do because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better about who I am. It helps me feel like I'm being more honest and clearly communicating who I am to the world. But I don't have to do that. If I just wear boy clothes the rest of my life, it doesn't change who I am in any way, shape, or form. So it's okay. You don't have to get hormones to be a trans person. You don't have to get surgery to be a trans person because you are a trans person. The things that you do to alleviate gender dysphoria, to bring your body into line with who you have always been, those are for you. Those are to make your life happier or at least have less suffering. They're not requirements. They're not bars you have to clear or gates you have to get through in order to be a trans person. And that leads into the last reason that I haven't gotten around to transitioning, and who knows if I will. I've gone so long that while I've never been comfortable in the body I have, I got used to it. I deal with it. I don't really feel like I could ever fit in as a woman. It's been too long. I'm too far gone, for lack of a better term. So I identify more with non-binary now because while I don't have any connection to maleness, except for, this magnificent beard, it, again, this is really hard to describe, so you'll have to bear with me, folks. I just feel like that even if I had a corporate sponsor and I could get access to hormones and surgeries and facial reconstruction and voice training and all the things necessary to be able to pass, that I just still wouldn't be who I could have been. It's not the same uncomfortableness, but there's discomfort on both ends. So for right now, I'm most comfortable as non-binary, though I definitely favor the feminine end of the spectrum a whole lot more, as evidenced by the fact that simply getting a new dress makes me grin like an idiot. So, of course, there's more to say, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions, but we'll save those for another time, because the point of this video was to explain that some of us do know from as early as you can imagine knowing such a thing. Exactly the same way you cis folks know your gender identity. It just happens to match the one you were assigned at birth, but you know who you are. We know who we are the same way, and that there are more of us than you might think. To any of you who are watching who have felt the same way, who have lived your lives in the closet, who have never been able to come out of the damn box, we see you. You're welcome here. And when you feel safe, we'll be really happy to get to know you.